Hello, hello. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to our facilitated conversation on breaking the code and going deeper into the mistaken goals. And so if you are here for today, January 17th session on misguided power, then you're in the right spot. And so once again, my name is Stephanie Brown-Liu. I'm the Executive Director of Positive Discipline Community Resources, and I'm joined here with Jane Weed-Pomerantz, who is our founder and local lead trainer, facilitator, and also parent and now grandma who's been practicing positive discipline. So thank you again so much, Jane, for joining us today.
Thank you, Stephanie.
And so let's go ahead and dive right in. And so we shared this quote last time. I love this quote so much. It says, you will be the most effective with your children if you understand the belief behind their behavior. And so that's what we're here today for. And so let's see. Oops.
Yeah, I think it's safe to say that everyone is striving for a sense of belonging and significance, right?
Definitely.
But we sometimes have a misguided notion about how we get that.
Yeah.
Kids are just learning.
And so we'll kind of take a step back and just start off here with the parenting styles. And so we gave the brief example last time of, the cook noodle spaghetti parent that's, too permissive, right? And so again, we just wanted to show, being permissive, it's like you're avoiding the conflict. There's no structure. You're unable to hold boundaries, which leads to a lack of safety and consistency. And then on the other side, we have that brick parent, right? The authoritarian parent that's too rigid, unable to negotiate. It's, it's my way or no way, right? You're dictating, you're seeking compliance or control. And often it's at the cost of the relationship. And so the case for positive discipline, right? We shared last time, it's kind of like that middle ground where it's, you're kind and firm. It's like molding clay, right? You're able to hold boundaries with respect and you're seeking to connect before correcting. You're seeking cooperation. You're essentially teaching life skills as critical thinking and problem solving. So we're not looking for just that obedience, right? But we are looking for that understanding. And so we often get the question, why doesn't positive discipline believe in the use of punishments or rewards? And, punishments with that capital P, right? Either that corporal punishment or, just the timeouts or the, whatever that other punishment could look like for you. So for us, it's really two sides of the same coin. So we see punishments and rewards as hand in hand, right? And for us, it's kind of like, how do we look at what are the effects? Like, what does punishment lead to? And so positive discipline, the curriculum shows us the 4 R's of punishment are resentment, rebellion, revenge, and retreat. And so resentment is, this is unfair. I can't trust adults, right? Rebellion, I'll do just the opposite to prove I don't have to do it their way, right? Or in many other cases, it's I'll in front of you I'm doing everything the way I'm supposed to, and then behind closed doors you're going the complete opposite way. Or revenge, they're winning now but I'll get even, right? Like, you got me this time but I'm just going to know how to do it better next time. That sneakiness, right? Retreating into I won't get caught next time. Or reduce self-esteem, which is even worse, right? Thinking that inherently they're a bad person or that they don't deserve, a positive relationship, that they're not worthy of respect. And so for us, really, as we take a look at misguided power, it's just so important to just ground ourselves in that the research does show that punishment and rewards are not effective in long term, and that in fact, they can negatively impact things such as self-regulation, intrinsic motivation, and the quality of family relationships. I'll pause there in case, Jane, does anything come up for you that you'd like to share as far as the 4 R's or even just as we look at it?
Well, I thank you. And I think that I think it's worth reiterating that behavior is communication. And our job is to have a full toolbox and to be able to sort of suss out what might be the drive that they have in that moment. So with the mistaken goals, it's okay to not be right the first time when you're guessing what it might be. But the key is to remember how you feel in that moment when you see that behavior, because that can tell you where to go to start on that chart.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, so still kind of backing up before we even get to that chart is to, first keep in mind, where is it that we default, and really kind of recalling how were we raised. I can just speak from my own experience. I did have, parents who kind of fit into the role of, mom was more permissive and dad was more authoritarian, where it was, like just wait until your dad gets home, right? Or at home we had the spatula of love, where we didn't necessarily have to get spanked, but just one smack on the table with that spatula and you had the fear of God stricken right back into you, right? And so when we're thinking of, how do we want to raise our parent or our kids now as parents, it's, it's like, it's easy to kind of default where, you don't want to do one way or another. You're trying to break some of those generational cycles. But at the same time, it's our default, right? And so just extending a bit of grace and compassion for the fact that we may jump around, right? Maybe there are some days that we're more kind of on the permissive side and other days we're a little bit more strict. But at the end of the day, what we're hopeful for with positive discipline, especially, is looking at how are we centering relationships? How are we making sure that the connection is really at the forefront, right? And so this chart is, something that is, constantly shown in different, in different modes. But essentially what we love is just remembering that there's no one right way to parent, right? But it's how are you looking at the end goal? Are you looking for just that short-term win to stop that behavior? Then yeah, maybe you're focusing on obedience. You're looking more at punishment over discipline. And with discipline, we're looking at guiding, we're looking at nurturing, right? Anything that you wanted to add as you're kind of looking at this chart here, Jane?
As you think about your relationships, maybe you have a partner, husband, wife, whatever, and there's always, I think, a bit of an unconscious tendency that if you are more on the permissive side and they're more on the authoritarian side, that you might try to overcompensate because you feel that you don't want the kids to feel hurt or sad. And then we're swinging back and forth. And the kids can see this too. The kids are very smart in terms of figuring out their parents. So if you may have gone to your mom instead of your dad to see if you could go to a person's house to play, because you might have figured out what that might be. So getting our center, that authoritative, I think you're right. That's the idea of being a guide, and that it's okay if this time you don't do it the way you wish. You can always apologize and ask for a nonverbal signal. How can I do it better next time? And sort of figure out in relationship what is needed.
And I love that idea of the nonverbal signals, especially for us in our spouse relationship, right? So with my husband, being able to hand on my heart is like, okay, I'm not going to intervene. I don't want to take away from what, he is trying to do as a parent, but being able to then, as an aside note, be like, hey, you know what? It kind of looks like you're losing your temper. Here's what I'm willing to do, right? Like, here's what I'm willing to step in, because just as you were mentioning, Jane, we don't want to fall into the trap of I'm constantly having to be the permissive one because my husband's too rigid, right? We want to co-parent in a way that we're being kind and firm so that we're both able to hold boundaries with love and limits, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so now, now let's go ahead and dive in. I think it's just so important again to just, set the stage as we are continuing to go through this mistake and goal chart, just keep in mind, where do you tend to lean, right? As a parent, so that as we're looking at how we tend to respond or how we tend to react, we're just keeping that in mind for, where are we and where would we like to be? And so we showed last time, and in the book that we're kind of following through here, the Positive Discipline book, we have, a list of mistaken goals. And so the chart is really great as it acts as a compass with the information that we have at first hand, right? I don't know what's going on with my child, but I know how I feel. I know how it feels right now. And so when, last week we looked at feelings such as annoyed, irritated, worried, guilt. And so this week, when we're looking at the chart, the feelings are very different. The feelings are, are you angry? Are you challenged? Are you feeling threatened or defeated? And so as you're able to, just center in on, yup, you know what? I am feeling challenged right now. Yeah, I'm feeling really angry. And so then the next step here is to see how is it that we tend to react, right? We're either fighting or maybe we're giving in, or we're thinking, you know what, I'm going to make you do this. Like I'm right. And I'm not going to let you get away with this. And so let me just pause there, as I know you have just so many insights on this piece, as I myself I'm raising a 9-year-old and a 1.5-year-old, but Jane has successfully raised, her now adult children. And so what does this kind of surface for you, Jane?
Well, I also want to ground this in a question to each and every one of you. How many of you have ever been involved in a power struggle?
Definitely guilty.
Woo! Think about that time and what was up. And remember the flipping lid part of our brains. We'd like to be in our prefrontal cortex and our wizard brain all the time. But when we get triggered, sometimes in a power struggle, we will flip our lid and go into the lizard brain. And that's when it's reactive. So sometimes, and I found it especially true when I was dealing with power issues, it was often the best thing to say, whoa, I'm going to take 5 minutes and go make myself a cup of tea. Would you like one too? So that you can recenter yourself and think about a bigger picture.
Yeah, I think having those self-regulation strategies for ourselves is so important so that we can co-regulate, right? It's the monkey see, monkey do. If we're right away kind of getting exasperated and doing that fighting, it's kind of like we're falling into that trap of that power struggle. And so I love how you mentioned, the flip lid in our 8-week class series and in our workshops. We really go into just such a wide array of self-regulation and cooperation and co-regulation tools. And that right there is such a powerful one, right? Where essentially, this, if we close our hand, we have here our prefrontal cortex, right? This is what separates us from the animals, right? Is our ability to have logical reasoning, logical thinking. And inside here is our amygdala. And so that's our feeling center, right? It's our fight, flight, flee, right? And so when we're calm, cool, collected, we can see a fly come in and we're like, oh, let's open a window and let the fly out. Right. But if we're stressed out or we've really had our buttons pushed, we haven't eaten, who knows what triggering email came in you just saw, and you see that fly, you're like so flip lid, you're like smacking around and you're like, I'm going to kill this fly if it's the last thing I do. Right. It's a completely different way of seeing this annoyance. Right. And so it's the same with our children. It's the same with our spouse, right? And so if we do know what strategies can help us to kind of come back to center, right? Because all day long, we're getting our buttons pushed, right? Different things are happening at different levels of the day. Or sometimes there's, deeper trauma and things that have happened in our life that we've never really been fully regulated, right? And so just being aware of that, whether that's breathing, praying, drinking water, eating, going for a walk, watching a funny video, right? Like whatever it is that will best work for you. And the more we can model that for our children, the more that they can adopt these coping strategies for themselves. So while they're at school or in other pieces of their lives, they're able to kind of realize, okay, yeah, you know what? Let me come back to center before I engage here. And so such a powerful example. I'm so grateful for your help to kind of like slow down and really pick up on that piece, because our feelings are so important.
And we can't forget that sometimes we flip our lid because it is actually deep in our subconscious and a memory that is coming out that our midbrain is throwing at us. One of the things that I like to do in classes is to have parents brainstorm the kinds of behaviors that if they were feeling challenged, threatened, angry, what might they be seeing in front of them? And for instance, talking back is one of those. And that might be something that triggers you to remember a memory. And when you talked back as a child, you were slapped or something like that. Who knows? So what we just want to do is help people realize the behavior that they are seeing and the feelings it brings up is a good first step to figure out. And what the child is saying in code, I know you're going to get to in a minute, but if you think about the behaviors, talking back, constantly saying no, 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 or yelling, or saying one thing and doing another. We can think about those behaviors that make us feel that way. And it helps us to be a little bit aware of, oh, this child might be needing a little bit better sense of power, a better way to express themselves.
Yeah. Thank you, Jane. And so moving along with the mistaken goals chart, right? Because once again, this is just such an underutilized tool, and we'll be sure with anyone that shares their email in the chat, we'll be sure to get you a copy of this chart as well. It's just a one pager, but it's really great to be able to identify. Again, first we're identifying what is our behavior challenge, right? What is the feeling that we have, and after that, how is it that we're reacting? And if we identify with that, then we're like, okay, yes, this is the mistaken goal. And so now we look at identifying the child's reaction when we're telling them or asking them to stop. They're typically intensifying the behavior, right? Or that defiant compliance. Jane has such a great example that has always stood out to me where, when they're, what does defiant compliance look like? You've asked and asked and asked and asked, and finally they're like, fine, I'll take out the trash, but they are dragging it the entire way. And maybe it's open and now it's a mess or whatever, right? But it's always kind of like intensifying the situation that's happening here. Is there any other kind of like thought or, just what this has looked like for you?
Are you talking to me?
Yeah.
Well, in that case, that 9-year-old of mine had been nagged a lot by me, and he walked across the house emptying the trash to empty the trash by tilting it enough so that the trash fell out the whole way. And that just accelerated the anger. And that's where, power struggle. And in fact, I don't even remember what I did at that moment, which is, I think, one of those ways that our brain helps us recover. But I do believe I withdrew. I think he also knew that he had accelerated the situation. And I think after that time, it improved. I think he started to see that it didn't really help our relationship at all.
At least in our home, a big piece of this is kind of such a big piece of like what you just said, right? The withdrawing. I mean, everything in hindsight, right? If we're reacting to something, it's because they've pushed that button, we flipped our lid, and we're not our best parent. We're not our best selves when we are in that state, right? And so it isn't a show of weakness to withdraw. It isn't a show of your children are now out of control, but it's actually a show of strength, right? That you are so in tune with yourself that you will not be your best parent if you're addressing this right now. And so that does look like, okay, I'm going to take a deep breath right now. I'm going to go for a drink of water. And after that sip of water, you're thinking through, okay, like what are those positive discipline skills, right? And sometimes it's, connecting on what just happened at your family meeting, right? Connecting on what just happened in a moment where we're both calm, because then even your child can even be like, yeah, that was not my best moment. Let me clean this up, right? Like they can also come into their own, right? But so again, seeing our child's reaction, right? The next step here.
Wait, before you go on, one of our guests, Chantal, shared that as a parent, the guilt sets in at that point when the lid flips. So when we're being driven by guilt, we're often also ineffective at looking for a longer term solution or teaching and guiding. Rather, it is a place of shame. And that's not always helpful.
And that's like that permissive parent, right? Where it's like, oh, I feel so guilty. I should have just cleaned this up for you. I should just come and rescue you from these feelings of upset, right? And or even as a try, to try and mitigate your partner being the one that's now coming in really hot and heavy, really upset by the situation. So again, it's so critical if you're able to bring in, whoever your parenting partner might be, whether that's an aunt, a cousin, a dad, a mom, a parenting partner of any sort, bring them to the class with you. As many supportive adults as you're able to get onto the same page is just so helpful. And so moving on here to the next part of the chart. So using this chart to identify what belief may be behind your child's misbehavior or your child's behavior is really key. So here, what is this misguided power saying? Our child is actually saying, I belong only when I am in control. No one can boss me around. Or what is it that they're saying? You can't make me, right? And so again, this is, when we're seeing that tip of the iceberg, right? It's, what is it that we see here at the top? And this is kind of like that underlying message of like, why is it that they're acting this way, right? It's on these beliefs. And so the suggestions from positive discipline that are at the end of this chart, which is always so great to just see, the different strategies, is saying, let me help, right? Like that's that coded message Jane was talking about. The coded message is, let me help, give me choices. And then here's a list of, other suggestions that can encourage behavior change. And for us, we underline that word encourage as it's so key. The psychology that positive discipline is founded on, it's huge on encouragement. It's like, that children need it. What is that quote, Jane? It's that children need encouragement like a plant needs water, right? And it's, like, what is it that we're helping our family to really center in on? And it's the value that we all belong and that we can all find positive power. We'll go more into the strategies in a little bit, but we just want to highlight these are a few of at least my favorites is, decide what you will do. Don't think, I'm going to force you to eat the rest of this or take the trash out or do this my way, right? But just decide what you will do. What are you willing to do? And do it, right? Act, don't talk. And letting routines be the boss, not constantly having to nag and remind and lecture, but just what is the routine and let the routine speak for itself. And really developing that mutual respect, that's huge, right? And that's so important while they're children and even more so as they're young adults and teenagers. And then getting help from the child to set a few reasonable limits. And the key for me there is reasonable, because I can ask a group of first graders, what should we do if, this person is, if someone is late, and they're like, oh, and they can come up with all of these, really great punishments. But that doesn't mean that the child helped you to set reasonable limits, right? Because if the punishment doesn't fit the crime, then we're not quite sharing that guiding example for what a logical consequence might be, right? Do you want to elaborate on that, Jane?
Well, I was looking at that chart thinking about what I might have used a lot. And I know some parents think, oh my gosh, this takes me off the power pedestal if I would actually acknowledge that I can't make the child do something and then redirect it to positive power by asking for help. Because again, it's give me choices, let me help. It's an acknowledgement that, hey, this room is a disaster area. What are your ideas about where we could start? Because again, that's a way of using their good thinking and trusting their abilities. And again, I think I mentioned it last week, that we always have to think about if there's a biological need here that we're not aware of. Did they just get home from school and they are overwhelmed with the day's activities, and then they have a homework ahead and now you're nagging at them, they're hungry? So what is it that might help them come into the space? It's the connection before the correction. So that, I think those are also very important. And offering a limited choice. Well, you could start on this side of the room, or that side of the room, or you could start with the books and I could help with the stuffed animals, just so that there is a sense of, hey, I'm not abandoning you and I'm not making you do this. We only have control over ourselves. That's it.
Yeah. So, so important. And I appreciate you bringing in the biological need. Another piece I appreciate from positive discipline is it's developmentally appropriate, right? And so we have, different strategies for 0 to 5-year-olds, to the school age population, to the teenagers. And so I think that's so key because, again, as I'm thinking of an example of, you're having to, leave the park and they're like, no, no, right? I mean, then, deciding what you will do is, okay, mom can, pick you up and take you back to the car, or we can walk together. Would you like to hold my hand or do you want me to pick you up? Right. So sometimes that limited choice isn't exactly, like, can we hop like a bunny or are we going to slither like a snake? Maybe we're not physically there, right? We're not able to use the tool of being silly or be, getting involved, but we can decide what we will do. And it is respectful to just say it in advance, right? We have to leave and I can either pick you up or we can walk together and hold my hand. And then it's like, fine. But I'm not going to hold your hand. And then they're walking alongside of you. Right. And so again, I think the key there is it that we're looking for obedience and compliance or cooperation? And we do want cooperation. And it is scary to have to acknowledge, like, okay, you're right. I can't make you clean your room, but, like, I would love your support because it feels so nice to play in a clean space, right? Is it that you have too many toys? And now they're, instead of being in like the flip lid of, how are they going to get control? They're actually thinking, oh yeah, well, there is too many toys. I don't even play with teddy bears anymore. Or, I actually don't use these Legos. I want these Hot Wheels. And so now you're rearranging the room or you're thinking through how to make the space more accessible for that age and stage. And so here we'll kind of keep moving along here. And so a big piece for us are visuals, right? And positive discipline, if there's one thing you can take away, it's the iceberg. It is just so, so key as we're thinking of, how are we being trauma informed? It's that we are going out into the world, whether it's in working relationships, romantic relationships, parent-child relationships, teacher-student relationships, we're seeing everyone has an iceberg. And we might never know what's actually truly beneath the surface for each person. As Jane was saying, maybe it's, something about how you were raised or a traumatic experience that has occurred to you that has kind of changed the way that you see the world or the way that you think about yourself. What we do see is the tip of the iceberg. And that tip of the iceberg gives us just 10%, right? It's that little bit that shows us a behavior or a misbehavior, right? But when we use punishments and rewards, such as the sticker charts or the planned ignoring or the timeouts or whatever that may look like, sure, you may get the result in that short term. And what we're hopeful for is that you're able to actually address more than just that one behavior. Because what happens when you kind of shave off the top? More come up, right? And so it's kind of like, you're never really getting further than that one point. And in positive discipline, what we see is that what is happening on the surface here, those are all opportunities. So opportunities to skill build, opportunities to gain trust, opportunities to build on that relationship. And so once again, if we're focusing only on chipping away at those misbehaviors and stopping or curbing those behaviors, we're never truly addressing the belief behind the misbehavior. And so what is the mindset shift? What is it? What is the call to action, right? Our hope is that you're able to think and feel and see, what is it that they're trying to communicate with their behaviors? Because just as Jane said, right, every behavior is communicating a need, or even worse, an unmet need. And so thinking through what is the belief behind the behavior. And if there's one thing that you can take away is that we all have a need for belonging and significance. I remember still very vividly in a training that we had a role play, and one of the scripts was, the parent is, standing on the chair and kind of looking down, and I'm here as a child. And my script that I was supposed to read out loud is, I'm just a child. I want to belong. Like, do I still feel safe with you? And that just, it still gives me goosebumps because again, we forget that power dynamic is so real and present. And when we're able to just do something as simple as coming down to their eye level and just the tone of our voice, is it that we're seeking to connect, seeking to make sure that we're safe? And then what are the rest, right? Anything that you wanted to add here, Jane?
Parenting is a very hard job. Teaching is a very hard job. And I think when we taught these classes in the jail, these were not people that were dealing immediately with children or their children, but they were dealing with the child inside of them. So in many ways, a lot of positive discipline has the added benefit of learning how to parent ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So key. And in these last 4 years, our curriculum has actually supported juvenile youth at Santa Cruz Juvenile Prevention, as well as their parents and caregivers. And one quote that just, still at the forefront of my mind is one of the youth, like maybe 13, 14 years old, told our facilitator, "Thank you for seeing me as a kid." Like, oh my gosh, right? How much do we put on these youth that yes, they're seeking belonging and significance through risky behaviors. Maybe it's through gang affiliation, maybe it's through whatever other pieces, but at the end of it, it's what skills and tools were we missing that we weren't able to model for them, that we weren't able to instill, and that it's never too late to seek that repair. And so helping them to re-enter their home, re-enter their school system, re-enter their community, like it's possible, it's more than possible, and it's the piece of the world that we're hopeful for. And so, just kind of to come back here, right? So beneath the behaviors that we see with the misguided power, it underneath that it's saying, I belong only when I'm the boss, or at least when I'm not letting you boss me around. And beneath that, it's let me help, give me choices, right? And that if we're addressing the let me help, give me choices, we're giving that positive power, right? And once again, children don't want our power, they want their own power. And so if we're not helping to redirect them to find their positive power or their ways to contribute in positive ways, then they're having to find it themselves. And so I believe last week we gave the example that, children are constantly, interpreting, they're constantly, observing and taking in the world around them, but they're terrible interpreters. And so we have to help connect those dots. And that's especially true in the younger years. And so what foundation are we setting up so that they can find that on their own, so that they're not always having to do a negative attention for us to redirect, right? But we want to be able to go from the manager of the household to the partner that's, here to cry with you and laugh with you, but you're a teenager, you're off in the world, and we have to believe that we've given you the skills and tools to be successful. And so here we go. So after all of this, right, it's what can we do? How can we equip ourselves with positive discipline? And so here's a couple empowering approaches to help address and navigate some of these mistaken goals. And so last week we had a different set of tools. This week, here are some new strategies. So first, as Jane said, right, it could be scary to have to acknowledge that you can't make them do something, but it's also deeply humbling for ourselves to say out loud, like, yeah, you're right, I can't make you do that, but I'd love your support. Boom, there we're encouraging their positive power, but we're also looking then for cooperation instead of compliance. Number 2, offering a limited choice. Actually, let's see. I think it was one of our board members who shared that, when they offered 2 choices, it felt like, still an imbalance. But when they offered 3 choices, it felt like, okay, I can choose this, that, or this. And so then the child was kind of able to come to it. So again, it's just you're the expert of your child. You'll figure out what feels right. When we arrive at a restaurant and we have like 16 pages to flip through of all of these menu options, we're overwhelmed, right? We don't even know where to begin. But if it's just, you're at In-N-Out and it's the 1, 2, or 3, you're able to just, go a little bit more smoother. Anything there that you wanted to elaborate or or explain more?
Charge on.
So the next piece is here. Don't fight and don't give in. That one is really hard, right? It's like you don't want to fight and you don't want to give in. So what do you do? And that's where, Jane shared her example of, withdrawing from conflict and calming down, as opposed to acting or reacting when we're in that flip lid state. What is it that you can do so that you can be a more present parent when you come back? And then being kind and remaining firm and kind, remaining respectful. That part about respect is so huge. And at least for me, I didn't necessarily grow up believing that kids deserved respect. I believe that was for our elders, that was for our parents, right? That was for the authority figures. And so when I came to positive discipline, that was one of those huge aha moments that you're absolutely right. Children are worthy of dignity and respect. And the skills and tools and the ways that we address their misbehaviors aren't always respectful, right?
Right.
And then this last piece here, decide what you will do, act, and don't talk. And so that one is also really important because that means that we had to have thought about that in advance. Sometimes something comes up and we're just like, I never thought that you would do that, right? Like that never even occurred to me, right? And so that's when, you're needing to kind of like gain your bearings a little bit, as long as they're staying safe and it isn't something that you have to immediately intervene, then you're able to kind of think this through a little bit more. Any other?
It is interesting to me to think about how the constellation of the family can also affect this. Say you have kids and you've seen a particular behavior coming from the eldest, because you're having to give so much more attention to the toddlers or the baby. And so there's this sense of you can't make me, and what is my place in this family? And so I think it is a bigger picture too. And that's why special time is as one of the possibilities in every one of these columns, because special time helps you stay connected with that unique individual, and to hopefully get their perspective on things and honor them for the place that they're coming from. And so there's the pre-thinking about, wow, this might be happening to them and how can I help them out? Because a switch in a classroom or a loss of a best friend or all of those kinds of things can trigger behaviors. So the thinking ahead, and then in the moment trying to keep your center, and then also thinking bigger picture. And that's the value, I think, also of the family meetings, so that people have choice and agency in establishing routines and how things and when things get done, and all that kind of stuff. That's that mutual respect.
Yeah, thank you, Jane. And in the book that, the Positive Discipline Parenting Tools book, a quote that's at that first chapter is, children decide amongst themselves which role they intend to play in the family, and parents reinforce their decision. And that's a quote by Rudolf Dreikurs, which is one of the founding theorists around our psychology of positive discipline. But yeah, that's so key. So last time we only gave you about 6 tools, but this one about power struggles and misguided power, I think it's worth a little bit more strategies. And so let's go for another round of more strategies, right? So it's just as Jane was saying, right? Let routines be the boss, develop mutual respect, get help from your child or youth to set a few reasonable limits, practice follow through, use those family or class meetings, and connect before you correct. It's just so key. And again, remember, children don't want your power, they want their own. So when we receive advice, right? When we receive any helpful hints or strategies, or as Jane mentioned, the toolbox, right? Like we need so many tools, and we're getting so many conflicting messages from the media, our parents, our friends, other groups, whatever, right? What we would like to offer to you all is a guiding light, right? And so the 5 criteria for an effective discipline is, first and foremost, does it help children feel a sense of connection? Because again, they're searching for that belonging and significance. Is it respectful and encouraging? Are you able to remain kind and firm at the same time? Is it effective long term? Punishments work short term, but they have negative long term results. Does it teach valuable social and life skills for good character, respect, concern for others, problem solving, cooperation? And last, does it help children develop the belief that they are capable? And that one is so huge, right? Because whether we're being too permissive and we're rescuing them and doing everything for them, or we're being too punitive and we're harshly, demanding and, and just asking for their blind obedience, right? At either end of those coins, at either end of that spectrum, are they feeling that they're capable, right? If I'm always tying your shoes for you, is it because I don't believe in your ability to learn how to tie your shoes, right? And so, that's for me at least, and for a lot of us, I think that practice positive discipline, we sometimes are looking for what is the script or what is that tool, but when we're able to just keep at the forefront this criteria, then we're able to kind of decide, oh yeah, you know what, if I do that, then I'm not looking for respect, or I'm not looking for a sense of connection, or I'm actually not teaching them anything by just sending them to their room, right? And so that's, we have so many tools with positive discipline, and there's so many other really great, positive strategies out there. And so if they're able to fit in here, then we hope that it's something that we're able to then transform the world through these respectful relationships. Is there anything here that you wanted to pull out before we open it up for more, kind of like Q&A style?
It's one of the things that Alfred Adler, the chief visionary who started this, said was that it's not what happens to us, but what we decide about it. And we don't know the decisions they're making unless we ask and are then willing to listen. But that's why I think I really love number 5, especially because if I could say in retrospect now, if I did something well as a parent, it was to help them believe in themselves and that they're capable of figuring out whatever they need to do to move on their own goals. So, belonging and significance, and then a sense of capability, which leads to a sense of interconnection and responsibility and all those things that we love to think our kids will have.
Yeah, thanks so much, Jane. And it really, something you said really also sparked for me there. When we think of just culture wise, right? How many of these pieces were already inherently a part of our culture, and because of, whatever else that, that has happened, whether that's, capitalism, white supremacy, whatever pieces that we're having to parent out of a place of urgency, right? Where we have to just go from one thing to another. I don't have time to offer you choices. I just need you to listen, right? Whatever it is that has happened throughout our trajectory as a society that has moved us toward a more disconnected parenting style. What I love about this is that it does bring some of those innate values, right? That we have to want to encourage our children to be a part of our family unit, that we want to encourage the sense of belonging within our own culture as well, right? So as much as we're wanting to break generational cycles of, of harm and violence, also don't forget that we have so many gifts and so many strengths that we bring in inherently from our own culture or from ourselves that we hope to instill with our children. And so we would love to open it up to Q&A and to remind everyone that we will have another 2 sessions here. The next one is January 24th, which will be on revenge. And so that one's another really powerful one. And then we'll be followed by the final one, which is assumed inadequacy. And so I'll go ahead and stop the screen share and just open it up for, let's see here. And just kind of open it up here to the group. And I will, let's see, did anyone want to share while we're still on recording? Because we can also stop recording if you would like to share without that being recorded. So, we're a democracy here. So kind of show of hands if you wanted to share without being recorded. And then we can go ahead and stop the recording. But everyone okay with continuing and staying on the recording? Okay, and so Perfect. So are there any questions or any thoughts, feelings, ideas that you wanted to share as a group that are kind of coming up for you? Go ahead, Maritza. Oh, okay. No worries if there aren't any questions. Let's see. So we'll go ahead. Oh, go ahead, Chantal.
Hi. Hi, Jane. Nice seeing you. It's been many, many years, but I'm glad I made it here today. I have a 6-year-old now, and I trained under Jane as a positive discipline educator, but it's been many, many years now, and I definitely need a refresher. One of the things as a parent that I want to kind of just share today is I value that patience is a virtue as a parent. And I'm finding myself, and I'm being my parent self here, is a lot of times it's I keep my cool, I keep my cool, I keep my cool. And I think the third or the fourth point is avoid conflict and keep calm. And I find myself doing that, and still nothing happens. And now the clock's ticking, and half an hour's gone by. You're avoiding conflict, you're staying calm, but actions aren't following. And so at that moment, it's 30 minutes past, getting out of the hot tub and to go home and to get ready for school the next day, and the lid flips. And so how do you kind of process being okay, that you understand patience is a virtue, you have to be patient, you have to be calm, and then how do you manage the clock as you're kind of bringing in the process of being calm, but now your eyes are also on the clock? And how do you get that participation back when you feel like you may have given some tools, but how do I get that response back to get going, get moving?
Maybe you're waiting too long. I think the patience is a virtue, but I think there's limits to that, because
Yes.
obviously
I think that's my struggle, is what's too much, where do I kind of draw the line?
So I loved timers. When I had young children, I would definitely use timers. And so would you like 5 more minutes, or would you like 2 more minutes? Your choice. And if neither of those work, then what would be the time that you could give? And it would not be a half hour. Maybe it'd be 10, but you would be able to say, okay, I hear that this is really important for you. But it's again there. Then when that ding goes off, that's it. So, and
nothing happens. That was my challenge just yesterday. 5 minutes, we're done. Nothing happened.
Yeah.
And that's my struggle at that point.
Distraction, redirection. I don't know.
Well, I would venture to say that it's easy to sneak into the permissive style of parenting, when really that positive discipline tool of decide what you will do and follow through with respect. Right. So it isn't just about setting the timer and hoping, did that mean anything to anyone? It needs to mean something to you. Right. And then again, that consistency, as Jane mentioned earlier, it might be a little rocky at first, because what are they used to? They're used to mom can say something, 30 minutes later, mom will say something else, a timer happens, and then mom will figure out what to do. Right. And so what pattern have we gotten them into?
So talking through it before the activity.
Exactly. That's a huge one.
Following through with dignity and respect. So that might mean, okay, this is it. I'm grabbing my towel. I'm going to get my clothes on. And it might be you want to race and see who gets dressed first. It can be kind of you can make the next part something that would be fun and interesting. Want to hop to the bathroom like a bunny or slither like a snake? I mean, just so that it is expected that you're moving on.
Gotcha.
And in your specific example, you're having to then get ready for school the next day. I would much rather stay in a hot tub than go and do night routine, right? And so the logical consequence there, not the punishment, right? Because we're trying to not do punishment. We're not bribing. We're not, coercing in that way. But the logical punishment or the logical consequences, you have a set time, right? You mentioned like the clock is ticking. And so what does your nighttime routine look like? And what will have to get truncated because of this extra pool time, right? And so maybe they really, your nighttime routine is, shower, pajamas, stories, and then, good night kiss. Well, you know what? We're not going to have time for stories. We're going to have to just, go do our shower and go straight to bed, right? And so it's not like oh, come on, but you love the story, right? Because that's permissive. We're back to that loosey-goosey parent, but we have a timer for 5 minutes and we got to go. Okay, here's your towel. Let's go. And if that means that you're having to then say, we won't be able to do hot tub before bed, that's for the adult, right? That's for us to know, you know what? It's not setting them up for success to have a hot tub date before school. I know it's Sunday, but you know what? Last time it really didn't work out. We can do this on a Saturday. We can do this on a Friday, but we can't do this again on a Sunday until you're older and are able to respect the timer, right? And so once again, it's deciding what you will do and following through.
The follow through is a good reminder. You're talking about it ahead of time is a good reminder.
Yeah, for me, at least when I came to positive discipline, my kiddo was almost about 3 years old. And, for us, it was when you get out of the car and you're running out and that's like a busy parking lot, our piece of where we lived on that street, it was as soon as you get out, you want to run and go see the ducks on campus, but there's, that's a street still. And so it's up to me as the adult to set it up, not just I took off your thing and now I'm like, oh my gosh, you're unsafe, right? That's that permissive one. But if you're, saying, okay, what do we need to do to make sure that we're safe? Oh, we need to hold each other's hand. Okay, here we go. Ready? We're going to hold hands and we're going to walk back over to the door. And then you do it. And that's and you're saying it out loud. We're holding hands, we're staying safe, and you're getting there. Right. But again, it's, how much of this can we model and for us to be that effective leader of the household?
Shauna had a question about tips and recommendations to move away from the permissiveness of the parent. And I just wondered if there was a follow-up on that, Shauna, or did you feel like you got some tips from what Stephanie and I were sharing?
Yeah, no, thank you. I couldn't think of like a specific example of that, but I know that I can tend to be that way and my mom tended to be that way. But how you were just describing, like you decide what to do and then you follow through with that was helpful. But I know it's just kind of my go-to. So in the moment, I don't realize until afterwards. So if there's anything that you can kind of help in the moment to just be like, this is what I can lay back on to help me not be.
I have another example, and it might be for a little bit older than toddlers, but we were at a restaurant, a busy restaurant, and our kids were starting to run around, and I was noticing how dangerous that was. So I called everybody back and said, okay, watch, let's look at what's happening in this restaurant. There was an older man tottering on a cane. There was the waitress carrying 4 plates on her arm. There was all sorts of stuff going on. And I said, wow, what would happen if you were running across and they tripped over you? And so they started to think a little. I mean, kids don't think ahead or I mean, even teenagers.
Not doing it maliciously.
Yeah. So, but they started to think, whoa. And then I said, okay, what would be some ideas, guidelines for restaurant behavior? And so they came up with ideas about how to be in the restaurant and be responsible for everybody that was there. And I was just so grateful that they were willing to engage in that discussion and see the bigger picture. And the irony is that we went to my mother-in-law's house, and as we were getting out of the van, my oldest yelled to everyone, okay, everybody, restaurant behavior. So it carried on. And so I think giving them some power in also helping come up with a structure, like the scariness of getting out of a car near a park and the streets, just thinking through and reiterating and repeating what is necessary for safety.
Yeah, so beautiful. A tool that I remember really helped me, that I'm going to have to start trying again now that I have a, almost 1.5-year-old, is the bugs and wishes, right? That structure for just, it really bugs me when X. I wish X. And we actually went to Dollar Tree, which is like, really affordable, like dollar store, and just got one of those little plastic flies. It's just like this big, ugly fly, right? And then a little magic wand. And so it was also just like a present reminder, especially when we were very early in attempting family meetings, that way it wasn't like the parents are saying, here's the whole list of complaints of everything I didn't like that you did, right? But just, one bug and wish that we can each share for each other, right? Like, hey, Dad, it really bugs me when you call me this name. I wish that you could just call me by my name. Something so simple, it really helps to kind of give that power back and really promote voice in your family, right? And so that's something that I really appreciated that we try.
Wonderful. Thank you, you guys.
Yeah, thank you. Go ahead. I see Brian and Ellen, you've raised your hand.
Hi, thanks. Our question is really, how can we understand more what our not yet 3-year-old grandson is feeling and thinking and wishing, when he's really just learning how to say, I can do that, or or me no like that, or he's very simple sentences at this stage. So how do we interpret what he needs?
You know him very well because you get to see him quite often. And I think that when he does use the sentences to say what's going on, that you acknowledge that. So you want to do this yourself. Okay, I will be here and offer help if you would like, but go for it. Let me watch, so that he knows that he's being heard and understood. And then you're going to be watching for the other things that he does, and that is such a me do it stage, that his sense of capability is so fabulous, and that is a wonderful thing. I also think that it is terrific to use art as he is learning to draw and use crayons and things like that. And it may not look as you think it should look, but hey, if he says that is a tree, go for it, so he feels safe in his expression. And you might be able to think about some of the things that he's working on. That's the playground, isn't it? What else is at the playground? Those kinds of things, to just encourage that language use. Stories, what books he chooses, those kinds of things.
And I went ahead and screen shared. So Jane shared this mistaken goal chart, which is the first 3 years. And so, we really firmly believe that the mistaken goal chart is applicable across all ages, but we do also have specific ones to teenagers, specific ones to school age, and specific ones to the first 3 years. And so if you put your email in the chat, we'll go ahead and share this out. We'll also share it out to anyone who emailed us and requested the recording of this. But we'll share the mistaken goal chart for the first 3 years, the school age, and the teen years. As again, I think you're absolutely right. Some of these pieces are, maybe more applicable as they get older. But, all the tools that Jane shared, I think, are just so beautiful.
Thank you.
And so we have about 2 minutes left here. I do see a message in the chat. So I'll go ahead and read that from Daisy, where it says, thank you for today. This was an important information and opportunity to learn to recognize the importance of continually working and recognizing one's emotions and how it impacts our reactions. Thank you so much, Daisy, for sharing that. Anyone else would like to share, or, just as we close out our time together, any final questions or reflection?
I have a quick question. I was just wondering quickly about, she had mentioned the 9-year-old son that ended up taking out the trash and dumping it all over the house and then just kind of withdrawing from anger. Was there any natural consequence to that, or was that just by withdrawing, she said the relationship got better?
Well,
what
knowing Jane, they probably had to clean it up after themselves.
yeah. Well, for that moment of outrage, I did
Mhm.
calm down. And then we talked about it. And I think I probably even offered to help a little bit, but he would be participating in getting that stuff back off the floor. So it was like a learning experience for both of us. And I'm happy to say that he is an attending anesthesiologist with a fellowship in critical care. You know,
Great.
things
Yeah.
happen.
The old, like how I was raised, like, oh, they have to be punished for that, or that's permissive parenting, but that's just not the way it
No.
needs to.
And
Okay.
that's why we brought up the 4 R's, which is so, so key, because again, if, you know, like if we defaulted to the way that we typically do it, right? Where it's like, that's it. Now you have to clean it up, right? Now they're cleaning it up and they're thinking of all the ways that they're going to move out of the house and they hate us. And, you know, like we're just kind of going deeper, deeper into that pit, right? As opposed to withdrawing, breathing, and then, you know, what needs to happen now? I have to clean it up. Right. You know, so again, it's like that cooperation that we get. It isn't just because it's like, oh, we love everyone, love the world. No, it's like, this is effective, right? Like, this is how we're not just crossing our fingers and praying that they do the right thing for the right reason when no one is there for the, you know, to give the punishment or the reward, but that intrinsic motivator, right? The I've made a mistake and I have to do it. And even for little ones, for 3-year-old, oh, it's dirty. What do we need? Paper towel. Let's clean up. Now we're not assigning blame, shame, or guilt to a 3-year-old for spilling something, but they're moving into, I need to sweep this up and I need to clean it up. Right. And it's matter of factly, right?
Very, very informative. Thank you so much. Very helpful.
Oh, of course, of course. Thank you, Adriana. Thank you, Mark, Shauna, Sarah, Daisy, Palak, Maggie, Brian, Ellen. Really appreciate everyone. We're going to go ahead and stop the recording here, and I hope everyone has a beautiful rest of their day. And please tune in next week for revenge, the next mistaken goal. Bye.